The story of David and Goliath, one of the most iconic and inspiring narratives in the scriptures, is found at the heart of the first book of Samuel, specifically in chapter 17. This account not only captures a dramatic moment in Israel's history, but also symbolizes the struggle between faith and fear, the weak and the strong. The scene unfolds in the Valley of Elah, a significant site as the stage where the armies of Israel and the Philistines confront each other. The opening verses of the chapter meticulously detail the setup of this confrontation. The Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim, between Soko and Azekah, 1 Samuel 17:1. This geographical description sets up the palpable tension that pervaded the air, preparing the stage for an epic confrontation. Verse 2 continues, Saul and the men of Israel assembled and camped in the Valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The immediate contrast between the two armies evokes an image of impending clash. The biblical text establishes who the combatants are and where and how they positioned themselves for the conflict to follow. Verse 3 tells us, the Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. The Philistines, with Goliath at the forefront, symbolize the gigantic and defiant challenge presented with arrogance and brute strength. In contrast, the Israelites, led by a hesitant king and soon by a fearless young shepherd, symbolize reliance on faith and God's providence. This introduction to the battlefield is crucial to understanding the fear, faith, challenge, and victory that will unfold in the subsequent verses. As the narrative of David and Goliath unfolds, it teaches us about God's sovereignty and how he can use the most unlikely circumstances and the least expected people to manifest his power and purposes. Thus, as the setting is prepared, the stage is set for one of the most memorable confrontations in the Bible, highlighting that, in God's hands, even the smallest can topple a giant. The story of David and Goliath is marked by a striking contrast between the two main combatants, whose descriptions are detailed in the first book of Samuel. This contrast not only sets the tone of the narrative, but also reflects deep cultural and spiritual truths of the time. Chapter 17, verses 4 to 7, introduces us to Goliath, the Philistine warrior, whose stature and armor both impress and terrify. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was 6 cubits and a span tall, 1 Samuel 17:4. This detail, specifying that Goliath was about 9 feet tall, highlights not just his physical dominance, but also the image of invincibility he projected. Goliath was equipped with a bronze helmet, bronze greaves on his legs, and a bronze javelin slung on his back, completing the image of a nearly supernatural warrior, a true colossus in terms of military strength and personal defense. In contrast, David is introduced into the narrative as a young shepherd, the youngest of Jesse's sons. David lacked the physical stature and armament of Goliath. His weapon was a sling, a simple instrument common among shepherds who protected their flocks from predators. The disparity between Goliath's and David's armaments magnifies the apparent chasm between their combat capabilities, making David's courage even more notable. This contrast goes beyond the mere fact of David facing Goliath. It illustrates a cultural and theological critique of reliance on physical strength and sophisticated armament. In ancient culture, size and strength were often seen as signs of the god's blessings and indicative of a decisive military advantage. However, the story of David and Goliath subverts this notion, suggesting that true strength comes from a deeper source, faith and trust in God. The Bible often emphasizes that God favors the humble and uses what is considered weak in the world to confound the powerful. This theme resonates throughout Scripture, as in 1 Corinthians 1:27, where Paul writes, God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Therefore, the description of David and Goliath does not merely set the scene for a physical showdown. It challenges cultural conventions and invites us to reconsider where true strength and victory come from. This story highlights that in God's plans, faith and reliance on Him surpass any armor and any giant, teaching an eternal lesson about divine power that transcends external appearances and human expectations. Goliath's challenge to the Israelites is a critical moment in the story of David and Goliath, recorded in 1 Samuel 17:8-10. These verses not only set up the confrontation between David and the Philistine giant, but also illustrate the psychological tactic of intimidation that Goliath employs. Goliath, presenting himself before the Israelites, challenges them not just physically, but also poses a challenge that has the potential to demoralize the entire army of Israel. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me." 1 Samuel 17:8. This statement questions the very identity and worth of the Israelites as warriors, and, by extension, as God's people. In verse 9, Goliath proposes the terms of the combat. "If he is able to fight with me and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." This proposal elevates the stakes of the confrontation, turning the duel into a matter of sovereignty and servitude. Here, the battle is not just between two individuals, but one that decides the fate of two nations. Verse 10 reveals Goliath's audacity and provocation. The Philistine said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." This final challenge is a calculated psychological blow, intended to instill fear and hesitation among the Israelites. Goliath questions the courage of any Israeli warrior, and implicitly, the protection and power of the God of Israel. The immediate reaction of the Israelites to this challenge is one of fear and despair, as recorded later in the chapter. The effectiveness of Goliath's tactic is evident. It threatens to paralyze Israel's army, both physically and in spirit, and morale. This reaction is emblematic of the power of fear and intimidation, which can often seem insurmountable, even to the most faithful. However, David's response to Goliath's challenge, which will be explored further in the story, serves as a powerful counterpoint. It underscores a fundamental truth found throughout the Bible, that God's power often manifests in overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles, not through physical strength, but through faith and trust in God. As stated in 2 Chronicles 20:15, the battle is not yours, but God's. This episode, therefore, not only sets the stage for one of the most dramatic turnarounds in the Bible, but also teaches a vital lesson about the nature of true spiritual combat, and the victory that comes from placing faith in God above human fear. The response of Saul and the Israelites to Goliath's challenge, described in 1 Samuel 17:11, reflects a significant emotional and spiritual depth that is essential for understanding the dynamics of faith and fear in the biblical narrative. This verse illustrates the immediate reaction to fear and serves as a mirror for the spiritual struggles faced by believers across all generations. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. This moment is critical as it showcases the physical fear in the face of the imminent threat that permeates Israel's camp. Goliath, with his stature and challenge, confronts the Israelites on a military level and also attacks their identity and faith. The fear expressed here is multifaceted. It includes the obvious physical fear of facing a giant warrior, but goes further, touching on the fear of failing not just as a nation, but also in fulfilling God's will. This fear is amplified by the stature of Saul, the king of Israel, who should be a figure of leadership and strength. However, his own reluctance to face Goliath reflects his failure to cling to the divine promise of protection and victory. This situation resonates through the scriptures in various narratives where God's people face seemingly insurmountable challenges. For example, in Numbers 13, the Israeli spies, except Joshua and Caleb, respond with fear to the giants in the Promised Land, resulting in despair and a lack of faith. These stories share a common theme. Fear can blind believers to God's promises and lead to disobedience or failure to act according to faith. This analysis suggests that Israel's reluctance extends beyond mere military assessment. It represents a crisis of faith. This incident in the Valley of Elah underscores a core truth that runs through the fabric of Scripture. The real battle is often against the fear and disbelief within us. As stated in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of self-discipline." The true battle, therefore, is waged in the heart and mind before it is confronted on the physical battlefield. Thus, Israel's reluctance serves as a powerful reminder that challenges to our faith are not merely tests of our physical strength or resources, but more profoundly, of our trust in God's faithfulness and power. This passage invites readers to reflect on how fear can cloud our vision of God's promises and how faith can empower us to face giants, not with the strength of arms, but with the certainty of God's presence and protection. At the heart of the narrative of David and Goliath, David's decision to accept the challenge of the Philistine giant marks a crucial turning point, not only for the unfolding of the story, but also for demonstrating the power of faith in God. This episode, described in 1 Samuel 17:32-37, reveals fundamental aspects of David's character and the nature of true trust in God. When David arrives at the battlefield, he encounters a situation of fear and hopelessness that paralyzes the Israelite army. However, his response to Goliath's challenge is profoundly different. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." 1 Samuel 17:32. This statement is not just an offer of youthful bravery, it is a testament to his unwavering faith in the God of Israel. David's confidence is further evidenced when he explains to Saul the reasons for his courage. He recounts how, as a shepherd, he defended his flock against a lion and a bear, rescuing the sheep from their mouths. For David, these were not just personal victories but manifestations of God's providence and protection. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:37. This analogy David makes between his past experiences and the current challenge is crucial, as it shows how faith is built and strengthened through personal experiences and testimonies of God acting in a person's life. This account also highlights an important biblical truth about the nature of trust in God. David does not see the battle as a contest between his strength and Goliath's, but as an arena where God's power will be manifested for all Israel and the Philistines to see. His faith is grounded in a deep conviction of God's power and presence in situations that, humanly speaking, seem impossible. Furthermore, David's attitude reflects a principle repeated throughout Scripture, that God chooses what is weak in the world to shame the strong. As Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 12:9, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." David therefore accepts Goliath's challenge, doing so with the understanding that his action is a means through which God will demonstrate his sovereignty and power. Thus, David's decision to face Goliath is a powerful reminder of the redemptive power of true faith and trust in God. He challenges us to trust in God in moments of great adversity, reminding us that the true battle is won not by the strength of arms, but by faith in the one who is all-powerful. The preparation for the duel between David and Goliath reveals not just a collision of combat strategies, but also deep spiritual and cultural symbolism. This phase of the narrative is described in 1 Samuel 17:38-40, where Saul's attempt to equip David with his armor and David's subsequent refusal to use it carry meanings that extend beyond the physical battlefield. Saul dressed David in his own tunic, put a coat of armor on him, and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. He said to Saul, "I cannot go in these because I am not used to them." So he took them off. 1 Samuel 17:38-39. This moment is crucial. David tries, at Saul's behest, to adapt to traditional war equipment, but quickly realizes that it hinders his ability to move freely. David's decision to remove the armor symbolizes his rejection of war conventions and, in a broader sense, human expectations of strength and power. David's choice to enter battle with his own weapons, a sling and 5 smooth stones from the stream, highlights his confidence in God's providence. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. 1 Samuel 17:40. This description emphasizes the simplicity and humility of David's chosen means, in stark contrast to Goliath's heavy and imposing armor. The symbolism of David rejecting Saul's armor is multifaceted. Firstly, it reflects an unwavering confidence in God's protection, suggesting that true strength comes not from instruments of war, but from faith. Additionally, David's refusal serves as a subtle critique of Saul's leadership, which relied on external symbols of power, while David leans on divine authority. Thus, armed only with his sling and faith in God, David prepares to face Goliath, redefining the nature of strength and combat. This choice teaches us that in the face of life's giants, our greatest defense is the trust we place in God. The confrontation between David and Goliath, one of the most dramatic and iconic moments in the Bible, is detailed in 1 Samuel 17:48-51. This moment not only marks the climax of the story, but also serves as a powerful testament to skill, precision, and faith. When the final confrontation occurs, the biblical narrative captures the tension and dynamics of the moment with vivid details. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. 1 Samuel 17:48. David's action, running toward his giant adversary, is significant. It demonstrates not only courage, but also a willingness to confront the challenge head-on, trusting not in his strength, but in God's protection. David, armed only with his sling and a stone, delivers a blow that is both literal and symbolic. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. 1 Samuel 17:49. This verse is crucial for several reasons. Firstly, it highlights David's exceptional skill with the sling, a weapon that requires precision and calm under pressure. More importantly, it emphasizes that victory comes from God. The stone, a simple pebble from the creek, becomes the tool of a miraculous victory. David's skill with the sling can be interpreted as a metaphor for the effective use of the gifts God gives us. The sling, a shepherd's weapon, symbolizes the humility and simple origins of David, contrasting with the weapons and armor of Goliath, which represent human power and confidence in physical strength. Goliath's fall, face down on the ground, is symbolically significant. In biblical culture, falling face down before someone is a gesture of submission and veneration, ironically positioning Goliath in a posture of involuntary submission before God's representative. Furthermore, David does not stop with Goliath's fall. He proceeds to ensure total victory over his adversary. He ran and stood over him, took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the scabbard. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. 1 Samuel 17:51. This final act of David is not just a gesture of triumph, but also a signal that the battle was decisively won. The threat posed by Goliath is completely eliminated. David's victory over Goliath with a simple stone reinforces the idea that God can use the humblest means to accomplish his grandest purposes. Thus, the battle between David and Goliath is not just a physical fight, but an event filled with meaning, emphasizing that true victory comes from God and is achieved through faith and obedience to his will. David's victory over Goliath, described in 1 Samuel 17:50-51, profoundly alters the course of relations between the Israelites and the Philistines, carrying significant spiritual and socio-political implications. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of its sheath and killed him, then cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. David's victory is a pivotal moment for the Israelites for several reasons. First, it immediately shifts the morale of the Israeli troops. The fear and hesitation that had paralyzed Israel's army are replaced by a new wave of courage and confidence. This change is exemplified by the subsequent advance of the Israelites, who, emboldened by the fall of Goliath, pursue the fleeing Philistines, turning what seemed to be an imminent defeat into a resounding victory. For the Philistines, Goliath's death signifies not just a military defeat, but a psychological one. The giant in whom they placed their trust as a symbol of indomitable supremacy was defeated by a young man armed only with a sling. This not only undermines the morale of the Philistines, but also challenges their perception of their own invincibility, leading them to reassess their stance against Israel. Spiritually, David's victory over Goliath reaffirms God's sovereignty and his intervention on behalf of his people. In Deuteronomy 20:4, it is promised that, "For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you victory." David's victory exemplifies this promise, showing that true power resides in faith in God, not in physical strength. Moreover, David's victory serves as a catalyst for his future rise as a leader of Israel. He demonstrates courage and ability to inspire and lead, essential qualities for a future king. The way David confronts Goliath, relying on his faith in God rather than conventional weapons, establishes a model of leadership based on divine dependence, contrasting with Saul's more secular and politically motivated leadership. Therefore, David's victory over Goliath is more than a military triumph. It is a lesson about divine providence, the true source of strength, and the importance of faith in God. This event not only changes the course of Israeli history, but continues to serve as a powerful reminder of the possibilities that open up when faith replaces fear, and trust in God surpasses trust in human power. David's victory over Goliath carries deep theological significance that transcends the historical event, illustrating how God powerfully operates through unlikely individuals. In 1 Samuel 17:46-47, David clearly articulates the divine purpose behind his confrontation with the Philistine giant, to demonstrate God's sovereignty not only in the eyes of Israel, but also to the Philistines and the entire world. David says to Goliath, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." 1 Samuel 17:46-47. This declaration by David is a profession of faith in God's supremacy and a proclamation that the true battle transcends physical conflict. These verses highlight three essential theological points. God as the true deliverer. David emphasizes that the battle depends not on weapons or human strength, but on God's power. This resonates throughout the biblical narrative, where God often chooses seemingly weak or insignificant individuals to accomplish his grandest purposes, such as Moses, Gideon, and Mary. This theme is a constant reminder that God often operates outside human expectations. Demonstration of God's power to all nations. The victory over Goliath was intended to reveal God's power, not only to the Israelites but also to their enemies. This aligns with Israel's mission to be a light to the nations, a central theme in Isaiah 49:6, where God says it is too small a thing to be his servant to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel he has kept, indicating also that he will make Israel a light for the Gentiles. God's sovereignty. Over all human events, David's assertion that the battle is the Lord's is a proclamation of divine sovereignty. It teaches that in all circumstances, whether in times of peace or conflict, it is God who is in control. This truth is a foundation for the Christian understanding of divine providence and trust in God in all life situations. Thus, David's victory over Goliath teaches us about God's providence, his power to use the small to confound the great, and his sovereignty over all things. This story is not just about a young man defeating a giant, but about God manifesting his power and plans through actions that defy human logic. It invites all believers to recognize that with God, all things are possible, and our greatest strength lies in our faith in him. The story of David and Goliath, while rooted in an ancient context, continues to offer valuable lessons that are deeply relevant to contemporary life. This narrative not only inspires us with the courage of a young shepherd, but also serves as a powerful metaphor for the personal challenges we face, encouraging us to trust in divine providence in all situations. Courage and faith in the face of challenges. David's courage was not born in a vacuum. It was forged through his unwavering faith in God. Faced with an enemy that terrorized even the bravest of warriors, David stood out not for his strength or weapons, but for his firm trust in God. He openly declares this trust in 1 Samuel 17:45, telling Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Facing the giants of modern life. Just as David faced Goliath, we all face our own giants, be it a health challenge, a relationship difficulty, a financial crisis, or a professional obstacle. David's story encourages us to confront these giants not with fear, but with the confidence that God is with us. Philippians 4:13 reinforces this idea. "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." This verse does not suggest that we will be exempt from difficulties, but promises that we will have enough strength to face any challenge through our faith. The importance of trusting in God. The lesson of trust is central in the story of David and Goliath. David trusted that God would use him to demonstrate his sovereignty and power, a truth that is constantly reiterated in the scriptures. Proverbs 3:5-6 advises us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." This biblical wisdom reminds us that our perspective is limited, and that we should trust in God to guide us through challenges. Encouragement to listeners. For those who feel overwhelmed by the giants in their lives, David's story offers a source of hope. It teaches us that, regardless of the size of the challenges we face, our victory does not depend on our strength, but on God's presence with us. As Jesus stated in John 16:33, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." These words are a reminder that, through our faith, we are more than capable of overcoming any adversity. Therefore, the story of David and Goliath is an eternal paradigm of how faith, coupled with courageous action, can enable us to face and overcome life's great challenges. Encouraging us to trust in God and act in faith, it offers enduring inspiration for all who seek to live a life of purpose and victory. Like the video, share it with someone special in your life. Grace and peace, brothers and sisters.